Welcome to the Cover 2 podcast. We are back after a 2-week break. Jared is back from Africa.
Hello.
So we're back on the air. I'm Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And we got a great show for you today, a packed-in show because, Jared, we've missed 2 weeks, so we got a lot to talk about.
A lot going on.
Obviously, Monday night we had the national championship for college basketball. A big game between Villanova and Michigan that Villanova took by stronghold over Michigan. They won by a lot. So we'll talk about that. Also, the MLB season has began. Already some interesting stories about that, so we'll dive into that. The Masters is this weekend, and still a lot happening in the NFL as well, with some words about certain players and stuff like that. So we will jump into all of that. But Jared, we want to start before we get to the sports. We want to hear about your trip to Africa. Just explain to us some of the best parts about your trip. You were there for 11 days.
It was amazing. I ended up posting a lot on Facebook and Instagram. It was my first time really outside of the country. I'd been to Mexico before, but it was the great thing was I got to go with someone who has been there before and someone who has who knows a lot of people there. So we got to do certain things that I probably would not have done if I were to go by myself, especially for the first time. So we got to take a game drive into the jungle and see a bunch of different animals, giraffes, saw some lions, even though they weren't really roaming around, they were kind of laying down. Saw zebras, a bunch of different animals, and it was like a 5-hour game drive, which was really cool. And then we went to a kind of like an elephant farm in a sense, where they take in endangered elephants. So that was pretty cool. We got to pet a couple of them, saw a bunch of different monkeys. So that was probably one of my favorite parts of the entire trip. We were in Nairobi, which is one of the main cities in Kenya.
Yeah.
We then took an hour flight to Kitale, which is a very rural area, kind of definitely outside of the city. And we went and visited with a school out there, so we got to see a bunch of kids, the guardians who take care of them, how the school was run. So that was really, really cool. We came back and stayed at a really nice resort in the city. Kind of the whole, high life, the flashy thing, you know what I mean? So that was cool. And then at the very end, we came back and we went to the national forest in Nairobi and got to rent bikes and bike through the forest. Wow. So that was really cool. So every single day we were doing something different, from eating all the different types of food to meeting the people. And the people were fantastic. They were all really, really nice, welcoming. Obviously, they could tell that we were foreigners and we were not from there. But it was a really, really great experience. And I hope to go back soon. Definitely, hopefully won't be my last time there. It was a great time, and for anyone who has not traveled outside of the country, I highly, highly recommend it, to get to see, how other people live and not just how we live in our Orange County bubble. So it was, honestly, it's eye-opening, and then, for me, I'm more appreciative of coming back home after, you see how some people live and you see how other countries operate. So overall, it was a great experience, but I'm happy to be back. Happy to be, I missed a lot of sports while I was gone. I tried to get some Wi-Fi on my phone when we were in certain spots, but I missed a lot of sports, so it's good to be back and talking sports with you.
Yeah, well said. I have a question for you, though.
Yes.
So you mentioned that you were with some wild animals. Is that intimidating at all? Because there was actually a video going around, I don't know if you saw it. There's a video going around like last week. The cheetah in the Jeep.
Yeah.
Any of that kind of stuff happened to you? Any close encounters?
No close encounters. The closest encounter that we had was we came up upon these monkeys at a certain point when we were in the jungle, and the driver, we were in a van, and the roof of the van pops up. So if you want, you can stand up and kind of look outside, as opposed to just rolling your window down, which is what we were doing most of the time. So the driver stops the car, and we came on. There's probably like 15 or 20 monkeys, and they were just kind of doing their thing in the forest. And he stopped the car and he let us out, and we got to kind of walk around and take pictures and get somewhat close to them, not too close to where we could touch them, because I'm sure they were kind of afraid and they were running around as well. So that was the closest encounter we had. That guy who was in that car with that cheetah, I don't know what I would have done. It wouldn't have been good. The fact that he was able to stay so calm is amazing, because I would have been freaking out. I mean, he did the best thing possible, because I'm sure if he would have made one move or done anything crazy, and I'm sure he would have been a nice meal for that cheetah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was, I saw that and I was literally like, I was just in the jungle.
Yeah,
And
that's why the first thing I thought
nothing
of was like,
happened.
oh, that could have been Jared's sheep.
Yeah, it could have been. You
Jared's
could have been
sheep.
doing this podcast alone for the rest of your life. It would have been a one-man show. It could have been the Cover One podcast.
The Cover
from now
One
on.
podcast,
Yeah.
exactly.
So no, nothing. Fortunately, nothing like that happened. We were pretty safe and well taken care of. But no, that I did see that video. That was insane. But luckily for that guy, he kept his cool. And eventually, did it say how long the cheetah was in the car?
Well, no, but you could tell they cut that video.
Oh,
so
yeah.
that it was. I mean, you saw the one part. I think the worst part about that video was the cheetah biting the seat.
Oh my gosh.
Oh man, dude, that's like what my cat does. I get intimidated when my cat does that stuff.
Oh.
You know a scratch is coming soon,
Right.
But to see that 200-pound beast doing that right next to that guy, you could see the fear on that guy's
Oh, are you
face.
kidding me? Oh, he was
man.
like, Lord, please just get me out of here.
Oh man, but so glad Jared didn't have any close encounters with any of those monkeys or tigers or lions or anything like that.
Came back safe.
Exactly. So we are well appreciated that none of those animals harmed you. They knew how important the Cover 2 podcast was.
They did.
And they did not.
I told them I had a show to come back to and that I need to stay safe.
Yeah, so good for those animals over there. But yes, it sounds like you had a really, really fun trip. One other thing you told me while we were walking up to the studio today, that there's a healthy amount of KFCs and McDonald's and Burger Kings and stuff like that.
It was ridiculous. I mean, I guess, it's nationwide and very popular, but like Subway, KFC, and Burger King were the three, I guess, popular fast food joints out there. I mean, obviously they have a lot of Kenyan food and a lot of different owned family restaurants and that type of thing. But we're driving on the highway and just even down the street, and yeah, you come up upon a KFC and you're just like, what? Yeah, really?
What the hell is
like
this?
Subway? like no, man, I'm in Kenya right now. I'm not gonna go to a Subway. First of all, I hate Subway, but second of all, I wouldn't go to a place that I can get food at back here at home, right?
Of course,
you want to try different types of food and stuff that you can't get here. So, but this is very interesting to see.
That's it. I just want to mention that. So that stuff, we can't get away from that stuff. Wherever you go,
you can't.
There's always a KFC or Subway or a Burger King. There's always one of those. But this is the Cover 2 podcast, so let's actually get to sports.
Right.
So the national championship, like we mentioned, happened last Monday. Villanova with a big win, and when I mean big, I just mean big because they dominated the whole tournament, Jared, and you could say it was the bracket, but they really had the harder part of the bracket, and you could say Michigan wasn't a team that deserved to be in the final, but they were. That's the way this tournament is. All the other teams lost. So Villanova gets the big win, and they're champions. Jay Wright champions for for the second time in the last 3 years.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. I was watching First Take on ESPN yesterday morning, and Max Kellerman posed the question and the answer that he thinks Jay Wright is the best college coach currently in the NCAA, and I would have to disagree with him on that. I think Jay Wright obviously deserves a lot of credit for what he's done with his program and the fact that these guys don't necessarily get the top 5 recruits every year nationally like Duke and Kentucky and Kansas do. But they find a way to really put it all together, and the fact that basically their star player, and I'm gonna butcher his name, so I'm gonna let Nick say his last name.
Dante DiVincenzo.
Thank you very much. Scored 31 points off the bench.
What a beast!
And the fact that one of the national players of the year, he basically sat the last 7 minutes of the game. So that versatility and that depth that Villanova has, I think, is the main reason why they were able to basically dominate the national championship game and get through the entire tournament. It was pretty amazing to see. I actually had them getting into the Final Four, but I thought Kansas was going to beat them. Obviously, that didn't happen. Villanova, not an underrated team, just not one of those top 3, top 4 teams that, in my opinion, people really talk about too much. But I think now that they've won the last 2 out of 3 national championships, this team needs to be talked about a lot more. Yeah,
I mean, they're one of those teams when you go, and I'm not the biggest college basketball enthusiast. Like, I don't watch the whole season. I probably will watch a little more next season just because a lot of those games were entertaining, and it shows that there is a lot of parity still in college basketball. Somewhat. I mean, obviously Villanova winning for the second time in 3 years, but it was essentially anybody could beat anybody. We saw UMBC beat Virginia. You had said the first ever 16 seed beat the 1 seed. You had Loyola Chicago, an 11 seed going all the way to the Final Four. Now we've seen that before too, but it just seemed like this was one of those tournaments we were talking off air about the fact that this was one of the craziest NCAA March Madness tournaments we've seen. And when you look at it and you look at the teams now that are the superpowers in college basketball, you're right, Jared. Villanova, you're going to have to put in that column with Duke and North Carolina and Michigan State and Kansas and U of A. These teams that have dominated either their conferences or just college basketball in general, you're going to have to put Villanova in there. And I think even a little bit this year, knowing that Villanova won a couple of years ago and then knowing that Villanova got far last year and were a top team going in, it kind of was turning the tide, at least for the Wildcats, saying, hey, this team is actually for real. When you watch Big East basketball, you know who the superpower is in this division, and it's Villanova. And I think now that they've won 2 championships, and especially dominating like they did this one, there wasn't a buzzer beater like they did the first time.
Right.
There wasn't a bunch of games where they had buzzer beaters like Loyola Chicago. These were dominating wins. I think they won every single game by double digits in this March Madness tournament.
That's amazing.
So they are a superpower in college basketball, and it will be interesting to see what they do next year. Because obviously they'll lose some players and stuff like that. But yeah, Virginia, you got to call them a superpower now.
Yeah, you do. If you're Jay Wright, you won the last 2 out of 3 national championships, right? Right.
Yeah.
He's a well-known coach. Even before he won, he's won these championships. But now that all this buzz and all this hoopla is surrounding him, I guarantee, and I'm not trying to make any speculations here, this is literally just coming from me, that other coaching opportunities will come up for him, whether that's in the college ranks or in the pros, in the NBA. Do you see Jay Wright potentially taking those opportunities on and maybe, jumping up to the next level in the NBA? Or who knows, maybe, Villanova is obviously, I guess we can call them a powerhouse now, but yeah. Would he take another job at another school, or do you think that he should stay put and continue to build on what they've done so far?
Well, I think the only jump he could possibly make is to go to the NBA. I think being at Villanova obviously is one of the top class. It's a top class organization. We saw, for example, another good coach, Shaka Smart, move from VCU to Texas. Now, Texas is not even a powerhouse, but that was a big jump from essentially a minor school to a big school.
Right.
But where would Jay Wright really move to? Would he want to maybe rebuild an entire college program? Maybe, but I think the only jump he could make is to the NBA, and yeah, I could see it. We saw with Brad Stevens how that's worked out with the former Butler coach moving to the NBA. Butler is not, before they had the whole thing with Gordon Hayward and they almost beat Duke in the final, they were nobody. Nobody really knew that Butler was just a mid-America school in Indianapolis or whatever that was, just in the Big East or whatever. Nobody really cared. But now they're one of the best teams in college basketball every year. They're one of those teams that's ranked in top 25 every year. So I think Villanova, as far as Jay Wright moving, it doesn't matter that he's playing in the Big East. He doesn't have to play in the ACC or the SEC to be a coach in the NBA. We see the thing with Brad Stevens. So yeah, I could see him succeeding in the NBA. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen coming up anytime soon. I think there'll be a little bit of layoff as far as he's winning championships. So I think we'll have to take him a little bit of, I don't want to say failure, but a little bit of disappointment for him to probably jump to the NBA. I think right now he's sticking to Villanova, but I could definitely see him move to the NBA. What about you?
Yeah, no, I think right now he's comfortable, and I mean that in a good way. I think there's some times where you get a little too comfortable as a coach or as a player when you start winning and you maybe get a little lax. I don't think that's the case. Comfortable as far as that they're obviously in a good rhythm, won 2 out of the last 3. And I think their recruiting is only going to get better and better. Obviously, when you win championships and you're in the spotlight more, you're going to get more of the top recruits at least taking a look at your school. I'm not saying that they don't get good recruits, but like I said, Duke in this 2018 class has the top 3 recruits. Now, I'm not saying Villanova will get that, but I think they will start to get better and better recruits. And hey, listen, we saw the depth that they had this year and 2 years ago when they beat North Carolina in the national championship. If they can continue to build on that, I don't see why Jay Wright would leave. I guarantee you right now what Villanova is doing, their AD and their whole athletic staff, they are, if they haven't already, they're talking about an extension for him because they don't want him going anywhere. So they want to make him comfortable. They probably want to give him another 3 to 5 years on his contract, a lot of upfront money to make sure that he is guaranteed to not go anywhere because, trust me, NBA teams and other college programs are going to be coming after Jay Wright after this.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. You got to stack up that money if you're Villanova. You got to give him what he deserves because, like you mentioned, if for some reason Villanova wasn't paying him an extension or they didn't want to pay him that much because of whatever finances or whatever, that's where you could maybe see him move to another college because if another college is going to shell out money, for example, let's just throw out a random college. Auburn wanted to pick up Jay Wright, and there's not, like I said, this is just me throwing out a random team. Let's say Auburn was like, hey, we got money. Let's throw $10 million a year, Jay Wright, right? And he'll be our coach, and Auburn will be a national championship. I don't see Jay Wright saying no to that, especially if Villanova's not paying him that. So I think you're right. I think the athletic director, the president of college, needs to give him more money, or you're going to see him either move to the NBA or move to another team. Like I mentioned earlier, though, I personally believe he would probably jump to the NBA because if you're winning championships in college basketball, why would you necessarily want to go backwards? You'd want to move forward, and you can fail a little bit in the NBA, like Brad Stevens did, and then eventually move up. I just think Brad Stevens is a perfect example because he's gone in there, and yeah, they got Kyrie and stuff like that, and it's not like he's completely built up that team by himself, but they're succeeding. They've had good years when they weren't supposed to. So I think Jay Wright could do that same exact thing.
But Villanova, hey man, I mean 2 out of the last 3. That's pretty dang impressive. I would not have called that. I think I could see that from a Duke or a Kansas or something like that. But for Villanova to do that with the players that they have, you have to give them nothing but credit. And like you said, the fact that they were basically beating teams by double digits the entire tournament. The first 8 minutes. Michigan, kept it pretty close. They had somewhat of a lead. I don't know, really after that, I didn't watch the entire game just because it was somewhat of a blowout, but it just seemed like for the majority of the game, Villanova was completely in control. It didn't matter what Michigan did. They didn't have the depth, they didn't have the speed, and Villanova just... Too much depth. Yeah, no,
I got home around halftime of this game, so I missed the first half. But from what my friends were texting me, what I saw on Twitter and stuff like that, it was just domination for Villanova. Especially, I kept hearing DiVincenzo. So it was a good performance for them. The game wasn't much to talk about. That's why we're talking about Jay Wright and we're talking about the rest of college basketball because the game was the game. They blew out both their opponents in the Final Four. So, it's an interesting tournament, and with the way the brackets ended up being, there was one side of the bracket that had a bunch of 9 and 11 seeds, and there was the other that had all the 1 seeds and the 2 seeds and stuff like that. So, Villanova almost proved even more that they should have been the champion because they had the harder side of the bracket, the clear harder side of the bracket, and dominated throughout that. It reminds me a little bit of Alabama the one year where they went in and killed Notre Dame in that national championship in football, where it was just, okay, they are the best team. They beat everybody this year, and they murder the runner-up, per se. But, so Jared, I know you might not have paid attention to it that much, but how did your bracket end up doing? How close? You said you had Villanova in Final Four, so you actually, did you have them getting to the final or no?
I did not. My Final Four, actually, I had 3 of the top 4.
Damn.
I had Villanova, Kansas, and Michigan.
Yeah, you had Michigan. That was the one where we disagreed.
Right. So my Final Four actually looked okay. Obviously, I did not have Loyola Chicago in my Final Four, and I don't think anyone did unless you were an alumni.
Yeah, or you were picking biggest cities or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So my bracket in the end turned out to be okay, but obviously throughout North Carolina lost. That was a rough one for me. What else? We had Xavier. I had Xavier winning. They ended up losing. I could sit here and go down the list. Michigan State. I had Michigan State going far. It was just all over the place. Let's see. Cincinnati, Miami, Arizona, Virginia. The more that I say it, the more it just upsets me because
there's a lot more that you screwed up.
There is. As I scroll up and farther up, it just gets worse and worse. So this was probably by far the most interesting bracket or a tournament that at least I've seen since I've started making brackets. Completely unpredictable. And what's going to happen, I think, next year, people are now going to start. I think people's brackets are going to get even more screwed up because it's like, oh my gosh, okay, this year a 16 seed finally beat a 1 seed, and there were so many other upsets that like next year when you make your bracket, I'm going to make like 5 of them. I'm going to make like a normal one that what I really think is going to happen. Then I'm going to make one that's totally screwed up where I have like 5 number 1 seeds losing. You know what I mean? Because you never know. Virginia, the team that was supposed to be the top defensive team and the number 1 overall team coming into this tournament, loses to the 16 seed, the first time it's ever happened in college basketball. So at this point, I think the brackets are just going to get crazier and crazier. But I think overall this was a good thing for March Madness. Obviously, from a money standpoint and from sponsorships and all that, the NCAA tournament, they want to have the big teams in it. They want Duke. They want the Virginias and the Kentuckys in there, right? Because those are the blue-collar teams that everyone can at least knows about or is somewhat associated with. But I think it's good when you have the underdogs, the Loyola Chicagos, and the UMBCs and all those schools in there. I think it's good for those underdogs to get some wins and create a little more competition throughout the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny is that we talk about this bracket being kind of busted for everybody, but in the end, the final was Michigan versus Villanova, and Michigan had been in the final back in 2013, so it wasn't too foreign to them, and Villanova obviously being in the championship for the second time in 3 years. So actually, somehow the bracket ended up getting 2 sort of legitimate teams in the final. You didn't have a Loyola Chicago, you didn't have a Kansas State or something like that kind of made it because of their bracket position. You actually had teams that were in familiar territory in the final, which is, I think, if you're the NCAA, you want to have parity in the tournament, but you also, in the end, want your Final Four, your national championship, to be stacked with teams that people actually, want to see and people know the players. You want to see your Marvin Bagley IIIs in the Final Four. You want to see, like we said, Villanova in the Final Four. You want to see Coach K. You want to see John Calipari, who never gets to the Final Four. But it's always fun to do the bracket stuff. My bracket, not even close. I had Kansas in the final. That was as close as I get. And I had Gonzaga obviously winning it. I think, did they lose in the Sweet 16? I don't even remember.
Gonzaga,
I think they lost to Michigan. So it was, at least they didn't lose to a team that ended up losing the next round.
Right.
I think I don't have the sheet with me because I disintegrated that thing the minute my Final Four got messed up. But I know I had Kansas in the final. I had Gonzaga in the Final Four. I had U of A, and I believe I had, who else did I? Oh, Purdue.
Oh yeah, so Purdue.
Well, the problem was Purdue ended up losing one of their star players, so that prediction ended up being a little screwed up.
They made it to the Sweet 16. They lost to Texas Tech, which is an upset.
Yeah, no, it is an upset, but again, they lost one of their best players. So you obviously you can't predict that when you pick a bracket. So I blame that guy for not making my bracket better. Up until the Final Four too, my little competition I did with my friends, I was in first place, man. So I was pissed when a lot of my teams didn't make it. I was not too happy to watch the Final Four.
Was there money on the line?
We bet $10. So it was like $100 on the line.
Bad.
Nothing terrible, but. Yeah, so and next year should be interesting. I think we probably both think Duke is going to be probably the most interesting to watch with their
right
top
now.
3.
I know they're favored because of the recruiting class that they have coming in. Obviously, Coach K, they're always up there. But right now, Duke is favored to win the 2019 national championship.
Yeah, because if you look at all of high school basketball and the guys that are going to come into college basketball at the NCAA next year, the top 3 players are going to Duke. So that is thousands of players, and the best 3 are going to Duke. So. Including Zion Williamson, who's one of the most popular high school players with all his dunks. Go look up his name on YouTube and you'll know exactly why. Jared, we need to go to break. So we'll be right back on the Cover 2 podcast with a little... We actually don't know necessarily what we're going to talk about, but stay tuned. It's either going to be golf, NFL, NBA. You don't know. So come back, find out the surprise when we come back on the Cover 2 podcast.
Because of fit. Yeah. I would take Sam Darnold if I were the Cleveland Browns. I think that that blue-collar, gritty attitude, I think his teammates will love him. I think the city will love him. He'll say the right things. He'll come in and he'll represent well. I think he kind of represents what Cleveland is. And then if I was one of the New York teams, I'd take Josh like that. I think they're both going to be great pros.
Good help from JaVale, and able to recover. Scala. Good stop there.
Uh-oh. What happened here? Gee, Merry Christmas, son of a gun. He did it.
This is the worst sign you could have.
We feel that there's a lot of guys who have a chance to win. They're all playing well at the same time, and so that leads to a lot of the anticipation that we have, for Thursday through Sunday.
What would success be?
A W.
No equivocation.
Okay, green jacket.
Who's the favorite?
I like my chances.
Cover 2 podcast back live on OC Rock Radio, coming at you with a little Cover 5 segment.
Yes.
Before we took the break, Nick had a little tease, kind of leaving you in the dark as for what we were going to do this segment. And we decided, usually we do the Cover 5 at the end of the show. We are going to talk about a little baseball towards the end with opening week. So we decided to bump up the Cover 5 to right now. And we're going to jump right into it with a little Masters talk. I know Nick really wanted to talk about this, especially with Tiger coming on strong. So, Nick, I want to get your thoughts on the upcoming Masters and how well you think Tiger is going to do.
Yeah, I mean, Tiger Woods, he's not the betting favorite. The betting favorite, I believe, is Rory McIlroy. But Tiger Woods has been coming on strong the last couple weeks. He has been in first place. He's been leading tournaments. He's been finishing strong. He's not getting caught like he was back when he's injured. He's kind of figured out how to play with his new back. That's almost a quote from him. With so many back injuries and so many back surgeries, you would think that an athlete would not be able to play at a high level anymore. And this just shows you the legend of Tiger Woods, that he's able to keep coming back. And now he's able to just play great golf again. Now, he's still a little more stiff. He can't, hit the ball as well as he wants every single time, which is why he's not necessarily winning these tournaments. But for him to be playing in his first full season again and to already be one of the betting favorites for the Masters is extremely impressive to me. And if I'm a betting man, I might have to throw a bet on Tiger Woods because I think he's always done well at the Masters. And I think that he's been kind of taking these last 2 weeks to really make sure he has a good run at the Masters. Now, a lot of other people come on strong. Guys like Justin Rose have been playing well, Dustin Johnson, John Rahm. These are guys that not necessarily that everyone knows, but these are guys that have been playing well. And then, of course, you have the Spieths, the favorite McIlroy, Jason Day. They're always in it. But Tiger Woods has been one of the strongest. He's been right there in the top 10 every single tournament he's played. He hasn't played a lot, but he's been in the top 10, which has been super impressive. So Tiger is, it's going to be fun to watch. It's almost must-see this weekend.
It is. I'm rooting for Tiger, and I think it would be fantastic, not only for him, but for golf as the sport, to see Tiger come back from everything that he's had to endure, especially with the back injury, to come back and win. I personally, I don't see it. I think there are so many other great competitors and great golfers in this tournament. Not to say that there haven't been in the past, but I mean, I could literally go down the list. Justin Thomas, Rory McIlroy, Jordan Spieth, Justin Rose. There's so many different guys that I think have a legit opportunity to win. That listen, Tiger, he's not one to back down from pressure at all. I just think the fact that these guys have, they haven't really missed any tournaments, and Tiger still is. I don't know if he's still 100%. I think he's obviously getting pretty close, and the fact that he's been able to play in the last couple tournaments has been good. But, I mean, in the last couple of years, he hasn't had the practice and the consistency that some of these other guys have.
That's true.
I am actually going to give it to Rory McIlroy. I think he has the best driver out of any other golfer. And I think, in the end, even though his putting maybe isn't the best, I don't know, for some reason, if I was a betting man, which in golf I'm not, I would have to pick McIlroy. But I am rooting for Tiger. I think from a rating standpoint and just for Tiger, for his mental status overall, I think if he's able to compete and be in the top 10, I think that will be good enough. Not good enough for him, but I think that'll show more of a sign that he's more or less back. It doesn't have to be him winning the tournament to say that he's back. I think if he's competing at a high level and he gets in that top 5, top 10 mark, then I think he's that'll show that he's
Tiger. It's funny you mentioned ratings, and I'll just show you how the ratings are really up with Tiger Woods. The Valspar Championship had as good as rating as a game on NFL Sunday.
Wow.
The Valspar championship, because he was in the lead. He was, he was in his vintage red on the Sunday. He ended up not winning. He got second place in that championship, but that shows you how big this is going to be. This is an event this weekend, and it's why we're talking about it right here. Normally, we would talk about the Masters, but it might be in, do you care, because it's just, it's the golf tournament, someone's going to win. But I think just how there's so many guys that can win. You just had a list up there that had all these guys, and they were picking different guys. I think they had 10 guys picking, and they all had different guys. It was Rory McIlroy. I see Bubba Watson on there.
Right.
Justin Rose, like I mentioned. There's got to be someone that picked Tiger Woods as well. Justin
there
Spieth.
is. Yep. So
it's just, this is a tournament. If you are somewhat in any way a golf fan this Sunday, this is your Super Bowl. This is your World Series, because this is the best of the best. And now you add Tiger, who has been the literal best of the best the last 20 years. You add him to the tournament, and this is must-watch TV. All right, it's 5 minutes on that segment, so we're going to move over to the NFL. There's been no shortage of news this offseason, so we want to jump into this main story that happened yesterday. We're recording the podcast on Wednesday like usual. This happened Tuesday. Brandon Cooks getting traded from the New England Patriots to the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams want to build an all-star team here in LA. They've already added in Ndamukong Suh, Marcus Peters, Aqib Talib. The list goes on. And now they add Brandon Cooks. Jared, what's your first thoughts on this trade for the Rams? We'll start with the Rams.
For the Rams, I was a little surprised, but I guess I shouldn't have been, because of all the rumors that the Rams were interested in Odell Beckham Jr. And who knows, maybe those were true, maybe they weren't. I think now that definitely takes them out of the Odell Beckham Jr. talks. But clearly they wanted an upgrade at the receiver position. I was a little surprised that they went after Cooks, even though Cooks is a small receiver and thought of as just a slot receiver. He can play on the outside as well. I don't know if that was just the Patriots scheme or if that was Tom Brady and his greatness that was making Cooks look better on the outside. When he was drafted and he went to the Saints, he played primarily in the slot for Drew Brees. But I think more or less this is really going to help Jared Goff to have another weapon on the outside. So now, if you're a defense, it's going to be really tough to stack 8 guys in the box and think that you're just going to stop Todd Gurley. Because before, they did have Sammy Watkins. I'm not sure that Sammy Watkins is a really number one receiver, and I'm not saying that Brandon Cooks is. But I think Brandon Cooks is a little more versatile, and I think he's a better receiver than Sammy Watkins. So I think they definitely upgraded at that position. And really for them, they were in the back half of the first round anyway. So to give up that first round pick, it's not like a life or death thing for them. I think that was a huge move on offense. On defense, it's literally, you mentioned all-star. It's almost like superstar when you bring Marcus Peters, who, since he's come into the league 3 years ago, leads the NFL in interceptions. Aqib Talib, who's a bigger, more physical corner, but he likes to take chances and he can get his fair share of interceptions as well. And of course, because you have Aaron Donald, who is probably one of, if not the best interior defensive lineman in the NFL, and you want to pair him with one of the other best interior,
the best
defensive lineman in Ndamukong Suh. I'm just happy that the Cowboys don't have to play the Rams this year, and I'm sorry that your Cardinals have to play them twice, because whoever the Cardinals quarterback is, whether it's Sam Bradford or someone else, they're about to get lit up. And if there's a small chance that he does get to sit in the pocket for 2 or 3 seconds, he has to throw with Marcus Peters, and it keeps Talib on the outside. So this defense, with Wade Phillips still leading it, is completely stacked. The one player that they did trade away was Alec Ogletree, the middle linebacker. They traded him to the Giants.
I thought that was kind of big, too. Yeah.
It was big, and I was a little surprised that they did trade him away. I think it was more of a scheme fit. I think he's a great, outstanding linebacker, can run sideline to sideline, more of a this decade type of linebacker. He's not a big guy, so he's not as much of a thumper, but he can guard running backs and tight ends coming out of the slot and that type of thing. So I was a little surprised by that, but overall, this defense is completely stacked. If you're a Rams fan, this is what I think the Rams as an organization are doing as well. Yeah. They know that next year, or hopefully, they're getting that new stadium, and they want buzz surrounding this team. So I think they're trying to stack an all-star team to bring to LA to basically overshadow the Chargers, who are also coming to LA.
Yeah, and the Chargers obviously almost making the playoffs last year. They're coming up, and they got guys like Keenan Allen and Melvin Gordon, and obviously a great defensive line too. But yeah, the Rams. I mean, I'm not glad that you mentioned that Sam Bradford's going to have 2 seconds in the pocket to throw toward Marcus Peters. That's not going to be fun to watch, but. Yeah, the Rams are great. I think you hit every nail on the head as far as...
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
No, not at all. But let's talk a little bit about Patriots. We only got about 1 minute left in this 5-minute segment. But Patriots get two first-round picks. They're 23rd and 31st, so you might see them trade. You could trade both. You could see them trading both of those up maybe for a earlier pick, maybe to draft the quarterback, because they obviously gave away Jimmy Garoppolo. And so they need a quarterback behind Tom Brady. We saw that, and some people were making jokes about this, but you saw the way Tom Brady tried to catch that ball in the Super Bowl. He does not look like some guy that is in the tip-top best shape. So, you gotta draft a quarterback eventually. We've been talking about that with the Cardinals forever, but the Patriots are now in that same realm, and having 2 draft picks, that definitely helps. And I think this improved both teams equally, because I think the Patriots can last without Brandon Cooks. They still have Gronk, they still have Edelman, and Chris Hogan. So I think they can last without Cooks, and they get the 2 draft picks. So we need to move on. Moving on to the NBA, the specifically the Golden State Warriors. We want to discuss Golden State Warriors a little bit here, because the Warriors are just an injury-plagued team this season. Obviously, Steph Curry is not going to play in the first, or at least not expected to play in the first round matchup, whoever the Warriors play. That's big, because if the Warriors somehow get one of these, 7 seeds, because the way the West is turning out right now, it's Houston and Golden State, and then it's everybody else. And everybody else is a very similar roster. So you could potentially see them play Minnesota, who has a lot of stars on the team. You could potentially see them play Golden State, San Antonio, who has a lot of stars on their team. Now, they've had some weird stuff with Kawhi Leonard, but still, this is not going to be the easiest first-round battle for Golden State. And without Steph Curry, they kind of revert back to the team that they were back in 2015, where they only had 3 stars in their team. Now,
poor them.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you said that, because that's it. We're not trying to feel bad for them, but they're not as good without Steph Curry. And they've been losing games. I think they were like at 1.2 and 2-9 or something like that in an 11-game span this year. So, Golden State, to me, I'm ready to give Houston the crown for the West. Yeah, because I just think Houston's really healthy. Golden State is not. And even guys like Durant have been on the, I keep want to say the DL, but Durant have been on the injured reserve list. Klay Thompson just came back. Patrick McCaw, scary injury the other night, falling on his back. He was one of their good bench players. He might be out for a while. So this Warriors team is not as good as they have been the last 2 years, and it will be interesting to see what they do in this playoffs. Because the loss of Steph Curry is big. Jared, what's your take on the loss of Steph Curry?
It is. It's obviously huge. And you know what? I'm going to spin it a different way, and I'm actually going to, think of it as a positive. Listen, there's obviously only one basketball to go around. So when you have Steph Curry, one of the best three-point shooters in the game, Klay Thompson, one of the best three-point shooters in the game, Kevin Durant, not only one of the best three-point shooters, but just one of the best pure players in the game, probably right behind LeBron James in my opinion. And then you have Draymond Green. That's 4 legitimate all-stars, okay? So you take one of those guys out, and obviously, of course, they want him on the court. But I think what that does is it frees up a little bit of game for those other guys. So maybe there's not as much pressure on them to every time they touch the ball they have to shoot, because maybe they're going to get more reps and more chances to shoot now. So I think this can actually help them. And when Steph Curry does come back, that's just only gonna add to their depth. So I think now this is strictly Kevin Durant's team. I think he takes the reins. I think he kind of plays a little bit more point guard and is in charge of bringing the ball up a little bit more and handling responsibilities. I think Klay Thompson gets a little bit more involved with not coming off the bench, but being the kind of scorer when the team is in somewhat of a slump. And Draymond is still going to do what he does. He's going to be a great defender. He's going to bring passion and energy. The thing with Draymond that he needs to watch is his technical fouls.
Yeah.
Because I don't think he's at the limit, but I think he's like 1 or 2 technical fouls away from being suspended from a game. And if you get 16 technical fouls in the regular season, you can then get suspended for 1 game, and that carries over into the postseason. So he needs to be very, very careful, or else Golden State will be down 2 stars to start the postseason. But no, I think this could actually be a good thing because, listen, not that they haven't done it before, because Curry, this isn't the first time that he's been injured since this group of All-Stars has been together. But I think that it's going to give Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson an opportunity to, basically be the leaders of this team without Steph. So I think it could be a good thing for them.
Do you think there's any, because we only got a minute left, but do you think there's any lingering effects? Because Steph Curry's had a lot of ankle injuries in his career, although this was more to do with his knee. Right before this injury, he had just come back from an ankle injury. Do you think all these injuries to Steph are going to hamper him in the future?
I don't, because before this season, I mean, if my memory serves me right, all of last year he was basically healthy. I don't remember him having any major injuries last year, so I don't think this is somewhat of a reoccurring thing. I mean, obviously, listen, he's a small guy, so I mean, yes, he's more injury prone than some other guys are. But no, I think it was unfortunately just a fluke accident. And I will say this though, I know it's the playoffs, and I'm sure he's itching to get back. But I think he needs to take this with precaution, especially when you're dealing with a knee. I think that's a lot more serious than just an ankle. So I think he needs to wait until he's like 95 and or 100% to come back. Like I said, I know he wants to come back really quick, and more than likely he'll probably come back at 80%. But if you come back too soon and that knee is not right and you tear an ACL or something, great. Now you're out for the whole year. So this team has enough stars that they can do without him. I'm not saying they're going to win, but that they can at least compete without him.
No, absolutely. So moving on to our last segment of the Cover 5 segment, talk a little college football. And this is a little mix of NFL and college football because we're going to be talking about Josh Rosen, who formerly was at UCLA, but now he is going to the NFL. He's going to be one of the top picks in the draft. Probably easily you could say he's going to be a first-round pick. Well, Jim Mora, his former coach and the former coach at UCLA, said some interesting things about Rosen, and even put Darnold ahead of Rosen if he were drafting. So a little bit of disrespect. The comments he mentioned were that along the lines of Josh Rosen being a millennial and not being, focused in practice, and you got to really keep him entertained in a way. So some disrespectful things in some people's minds said about Rosen, and then I thought it was even more disrespectful that he put Darnold ahead of Rosen in a draft pecking order. But so, Jerry, I'll let you start. What do you think about this whole Jim Mora, Josh Rosen thing? Do you think this affects his draft stock, or do you think this is just kind of a coach that was fired and a coach that's mad that he didn't really succeed with him?
You know what? This is the tough one because obviously, listen, if you're Josh Rosen, this is your former coach, the guy that has been your coach your entire collegiate career, coming out and saying these things about you. Now, if you're Josh Rosen, you basically just have to have thick skin and say, listen, he's not my coach anymore. He might still be a friend, and who knows, maybe he was just being honest. I guarantee that there was NFL scouts and NFL coaches and GMs who have gone to Jim Mora and said, hey, what was he like in your program? What does he like to work with? Is he a team leader? Is he a guy that you have to watch all the time? And the reports that have been coming out throughout Josh Rosen's entire collegiate career was the fact that he wasn't always a team player. And not to say that he was a selfish guy, but he wasn't one of those rally, hoorah type of guys. He wasn't a Tim Tebow or anything like that. Not to say that you have to be a Tim Tebow in order to lead, but he's more of a guy that, he can take the criticism and he's okay with having some controversy. And listen, some teams are going to shy away from that. Some teams don't want that. Some teams want a guy who, no matter what the situation is going to put a smile on his face, is going to go out and have encouraging words. Some teams are okay with taking a guy like this who, he might not always be the bright shining star, but when he gets on the field and he puts that helmet on, he's going to go win football games for us, which is why a lot of mock drafts have Josh Rosen going to New York. Obviously, it's a huge spotlight in New York, a lot of media hoopla, and a lot of people think that with his personality, he can deal with the type of scrutiny that will come his way eventually. So I don't really think too much of it, only because this isn't the first time that I've heard these types of reports coming from Josh Rosen. If we had heard before that he was just a stand-up guy and nothing was ever ever come up like this before, then I think that's alarming. But for me, this is his personality. You take it or leave it. There's other quarterbacks in this draft for these top teams to go get. So if you don't like him, then there's 4 other guys that I can name that are just as qualified to start. But I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Yeah, I really didn't. I really didn't think it was that big of a deal either because, like we mentioned, Mora, he didn't succeed at UCLA. He never, I believe, he never even won the Pac-12. One of those years, I think Stanford would beat him or USC would beat him, and he almost turned around USC's program. I mean, USC had a chance to suck and then become good under Mora's reign at UCLA. And us being from Southern California, we know this personally. We get to see them every week. So, I think this might be a little bit of Mora being bitter, not necessarily of Josh Rosen, but just being bitter of the whole situation with UCLA. He probably was being honest, but the way he said the things and calling Josh Rosen a millennial and saying that, all the other guys are millennials too. It's not like, why not say that about Darnold and say that about Allen and stuff like that. So weird comments he made, but I don't think it will affect Josh Rosen's stock that much. I think, like you mentioned, a lot of people know where he came from. Being from Southern California and following this kid, I've followed him since he was in high school. He was an absolute standout quarterback at St. John Bosco, one of the top high school programs in the nation. He was kind of coddled there. He's from Manhattan Beach. It's a beach community where he grew up affluent. He goes to UCLA, another affluent school, and he succeeded every way. So why wouldn't he be confident? Why wouldn't he have an air of brash to him? So you take it or leave it. But you look at one of his best moments last year, leading a team from 34 down late in the third quarter to win a game. That doesn't seem like a quarterback that doesn't care to me. So I think Josh Rosen's stock won't be hurt that much, and I think this is all just smoke blown by Jim Mora. So that's the end of our Cover 5 segment. We're going to be going back, we're going to be moving on after this break to a little Do You Care? And the first time in 2 weeks, we got a lot to talk about. We got a lot of great stories, including some baseball, boxing, all this stuff. So come back. You don't want to miss Do You Care on the other side of this quick break.
Throwing his body in, it's going to fall for Ibrahimovic! For Ibrahimovic, he knew he was offside, he left it alone. Cole picks it up. Cole's cross, Ibrahimovic! Are you serious? Ogunbowale for the win. Good! Enrique Ogunbowale! That's out toward right center field. Going back on it is Zimmer. At the wall. Gone! Big fly, Ohtani-san!
We are back here on the Cover 2 podcast with a segment that's been 2 weeks in the making, Jared. It's time for Do You Care?
Nick's been waiting 2 weeks to do that.
It's time for Do You Care, guys, and I'm very excited because we got 8 questions for you today. Normally we have 6, but we got 8 because we missed 2 weeks, so we got a lot to talk about. And Jared, you're going to get the first question since you were in Africa. You're going to get this first question. That has nothing to do with anything, but I'm just saying. Jared, do you care that Shohei Ohtani made his debut as a pitcher and a hitter in the MLB?
I do, because the last time that this was done was, I believe, back in the early it was basically Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth, yes, was the last. Yeah, he's pretty popular. He was the last player to, in his first 10 games of a regular season, to start a game as a pitcher and then start a game as a hitter. So Ohtani now is on the list with a, obviously, very well-known Hall of Famer. And he has a lot to live up to. And he was able to, last night, hit his first home run. His first at-bat in Angels Stadium. Mm-hmm. At his actual first at-bat, opening day, he hit a single in his first at-bat, which was nice. So I think, you know what, he's coming along. He's still, last night I saw him swing at a nasty curveball, and he looked like a little league hitter. So, you know, I think he's still going through some struggles, and even with his pitching, it's going to take time for him to actually settle down. But so far, I think he's really been on par with what the Angels have expected from him. And there's a lot on his shoulders right now. Obviously, this Angels team is pretty loaded, and they have a lot of stars on their team. But with the celebrity status that he brings, there's a lot expected from him. And I'm not saying he's going to get to that elite status, but I think he's off to somewhat of a good start in the 5 or 6 games that the Angels have played so far. Nick, do you care, sticking with baseball, that Giancarlo Stanton was booed in New York?
No, I don't care, because this is just New York being New York, right? You have to boo Stanton. Now, Stanton, I'll tell you this, deserved to be booed. 5 at-bats, 5 strikeouts. Now, I wonder what would have happened if he didn't hit those 2 home runs on opening day in Toronto. Okay, so he did well in Toronto away from home. It was raining yesterday. I'll give him a pass. But, good for the New York fans, giving him what he deserves. And Didi Gregorius in their game yesterday, 2 home runs and 8 RBIs. So, the guy batting right behind Stanton is doing well. So, no, Stan will improve, but I'll give him a pass. It was raining, and it was, his first time in Yankee Stadium as a hometown player. So, although Shohei Ohtani did fantastic in his game, his first at-bat as an Angel, Stanton did not do as well, but I'll give him a pass. But if he keeps doing this and maybe has a couple other games, maybe not getting the pass. He's only hit, I believe, 2 home runs so far this season, so it's not like he's on pace to hit 70 yet. But 5 strikeout game deserves booing for anybody, and nobody gets away from that. So, no, I do not care, but hopefully Stanton does well in New York. Jared, do you care that RG3 has been signed to the Ravens?
I do care. I think this is a big deal for RG3, not necessarily for the Ravens. They, as of right now, still have Joe Flacco as their starter. And very interesting that the Ravens, of all teams, would sign RG3 as their backup quarterback. But for him, I think it's obviously another opportunity to show that he can still play in this league. And you know what? He needs to stay healthy, and I think he needs to make good throwing decisions in order to be the backup, because he only signed a 1-year deal. So I guarantee that it would be very easy for the Ravens to get out of this contract if they feel that RG3 isn't playing up to the standards that they expect. So it's obviously been a couple years since he took off. He was not in the league last year at all, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been 2 years since he's actually played a game in the National Football League. So I think there's going to be a little rust in the beginning. But listen, if he, I think he definitely deserves another opportunity to play. Playing in Cleveland, that was just, to me, never ever going to work out. So now that he gets to go to in that same division, but a team that's a little more well established, better playmakers around him, and we'll see what he does. I don't expect him to take over Joe Flacco's starting job, but I think he's a decent insurance policy, and good for him. Glad to see him back in the league. Nick, do you care that Notre Dame women's team wins the national championship?
Yeah, I do care, because the way they won it was amazing. Enrique Ngumbawale, the hard name to pronounce, with 2 buzzer beaters to win not only the Final Four game against UConn, the powerhouse in women's college basketball, but then she also hit a buzzer beater to win the national championship, a la Josh Hart from a couple years ago. I believe that was the guy. Was that the guy who won the championship for Villanova?
Villanova. It wasn't Josh Hart.
It wasn't Josh Hart. But Josh Hart played on that team, so I was close. But in the way she shot the last shot too was off balance. Falling to her right, and just a huge shot. They beat Mississippi State in the final, and like I mentioned, UConn in the Final Four. So good for them. And I just, I enjoy, I don't know why, but I enjoy seeing UConn lose. I just, they've been dominating the sport, and they win every single year, but the last 2 years, we've had buzzer beaters beat them, and then Enrique Ngumbawale makes another buzzer beater win the whole thing, so she creates even more of a legend for herself. But, man, it's always good to see UConn lose, and they've lost in 2 straight Final Fours now. South Carolina winning the championship last year, and then now Notre Dame winning it this year. It's their first national title since 2001. So good for Notre Dame, and I will always like buzzer beaters. I will never dislike buzzer beaters. Jared, do you care that Isaiah Thomas is having hip surgery?
No, I don't care. Yeah, it's unfortunate for him. Obviously, this is his second hip surgery. The first one was a major hip surgery when he got injured for the Celtics on that playoff series. I believe it was last year or 2 years ago. But no, I mean, listen, he's been decent for the Lakers when he's played. But I never really expected much from him when the Lakers did trade and signed him. So for him, I think it was just kind of a temporary stop, a bridge team. And this is kind of a bad thing for him because I think what he was trying to do, at least with the Lakers to end the season, since they're already eliminated from the playoffs, was to put out good tape for next year, for teams to say, hey, listen, I can still play at an elite level, and he wants that next long-term contract. So this obviously isn't good for him because he won't be able to put out that tape anymore. But hopefully he can recover fast, and I know there's going to be a team out there that's going to give him a shot. I don't think it's going to be the Lakers because I think they're more or less looking for younger players through the draft and other guys in free agency. But hopefully he can come back from this soon and get back to somewhat of that elite status that he had when he was with the Celtics. Nick, do you care that Zlatan Ibrahimovic
Yep, you got
nice, made his debut this past week for the LA Galaxy?
Yes, I do care. And I if you're a sports fan, there's no way you didn't see what he did last Saturday. Zlatan Ibrahimovic, he's already calling the MLS MLZ, Major League Zlatan.
Oh, boy.
So the guy is coming over from Manchester United. And the big thing about him coming over, and by the way, he scored 2 goals in his debut, one from 40 yards out a couple minutes before he came in. He led the Galaxy from a 3-0 deficit to come back 4-3, had a winning goal in the 90th minute of the game off a header, and just took LA by storm, took the MLS by storm last Saturday. But he comes over from Manchester United, like I mentioned. He was one of the top players in Manchester United last year. This is not your typical player that signs at the end of his career with the LA Galaxy, which we've seen a lot. We've seen David Beckham, although David Beckham was somewhat in the prime of his career too when he came over. But this isn't Steven Gerrard. This isn't, Thierry Henry. This is a guy that is literally better than every single player in the MLS coming over the MLS. It would be like Mike Trout going and playing in, I guess, maybe the Italian league or something, like going to play in the Cuban league. He is better than everybody else, and he's going over. So it'll be absolutely fun to watch him play for the LA Galaxy. The LAFC, LA Galaxy rivalry is already off to a great foot. The amazing crowd last Saturday. But Zlatan, although he's 36, he's the Tom Brady of 36. He still is a very elite player. And another interesting thing, just to show you how passionate he is about coming to the U.S. and proving in the U.S. that he can win a championship and maybe change the MLS, he turned down apparently $100 million from China to sign a 2-year, $3 million deal with the LA Galaxy.
Wow.
So he's here to stay, and if you're an LA Galaxy fan, you're an MLS fan, he's here to do well. Because it's not about the money. He mentioned that on SportsCenter last night. It's not about the money for him. So, yeah, if you're somewhat of a soccer fan, start watching LA Galaxy games because they're extremely entertaining. Jared, do you care that Canelo Triple G 2 is now not happening anymore?
Yes, I do care. Obviously, I'm not the biggest boxing fan, and I'm sure that you, Nick, can attest to this as more of a fan who watches this more dominantly. But obviously, this was a huge matchup, especially the rematch. But now it's not going to happen, and there's a lot of different speculations as to why. As far as the doping violations and the Nevada State Commission not letting him. Listen, there's been accusations of him not being a clean fighter before, and I think for Canelo, I think this is listen. I don't know too much about him, but when you have multiple accusations about doping, I think there's something there. I think where there's smoke, there's fire. And if you're Triple G, you have to sit there and say, hey, listen, why can't you come out and fight clean and train clean? Why does there always have to be something, whether it was the fact that you ate a certain type of bad meat or whatever the case may be? Like, how is it so hard for you to keep yourself clean when there's so many other boxers who have been able to do so, especially knowing the magnitude of this fight, the amount of money that there's going to be made, the publicity, the sponsorships, all that stuff. And, you know, now this fight has to be canceled. I can almost guarantee that it will be rescheduled for maybe August or sometime later in the year. But, you know, I think it's kind of it takes some of the air out of this fight already because there are so many people that are looking forward to this. So I'm sure it will come up, I'm sure it will be rescheduled and this fight is going to happen. But the fact that there are all these other speculations about doping and you know, not being a clean fighter, I think that has to put a little bit of a damper into this fight. Nick, last question for you. Do you care about UFC 223?
Yes, I do. It's a huge card this Saturday, April 7th, that has been changed quite a bit in the last weekend. So I'll start it off this way. I'll explain to you guys what's been going on with this pay-per-view. So originally the main events were Tony Ferguson versus, wait for this, Jared, Khabib Nurmagomedov.
Wow, that was good.
For the lightweight championship. Tony, this fight has been, they've been trying to have it happen for a long time. Both guys kept getting injured, so they never could get it done. They finally were going to have it happen. This fight is popular because Conor McGregor was going to lose his lightweight championship, so this was going to be officially for the lightweight championship. Conor McGregor is being stripped no matter what this Saturday of the lightweight championship for obviously doing the boxing and just being inactive as a champion. So it was going to be a fight for the championship. Well, Tony Ferguson, who is the right now champion, the interim champion, but will be the actual champion, tripped over a production cable, just doing stuff with Fox. We're getting ready for the fight, and tore his ACL. So he's out now, and now Dana White has stripped him of his title because of he kept getting injured. So now Max Holloway, who is the featherweight champion, is now going to fight Khabib for the lightweight championship to try to become a double champion on 6 days' notice.
That's a lot
That
to
is
follow.
still the main event of UFC 23. The second co-main event, which would be a main event on any other pay-per-view, is Rose Namajunas, who won the title from this girl, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. And Jared, when you see me spell her name, you're going to wonder if I was, on drugs, trying to spell her name. But this is a rematch. Joanna had won a bunch of fights before that in a row, defending her title. So it was kind of an upset when Rose beat her. So this is a great fight. It's a great card, guys. And obviously with the crazy stuff with Max Holloway coming in, trying to become a double champ. Khabib, who's been said to be one of the most dominant fighters in UFC, to not ever hold a title. He's expected to win, but you never know. And if Max wins, he'd be only the second ever UFC fighter to win, to have two titles at once, the other being Conor McGregor, who's now been stripped of both those titles. So crazy weekend going on, at least for the UFC, and I'm ready to watch it. And the two main events obviously are going to be a must-watch for any fight fan or UFC fan. But Jared, that's it for Do You Care this week. It was a good one. We're going to come back after this break, though. A little MLB prediction segment. The season's already started, and I'm actually glad the season started already because there's some teams that have been playing well that will sway my original playoff picks. But so we'll make our playoff picks, our World Series picks, MVPs, all that on the other side of this quick break.
Stanton, the National League MVP last year, swung on and drilled to deep right center field. It is high, it is far, it is gone! It is first Yankee at bat. Giancarlo non si può stopparlo. It is a Stantonian home run, a two-run blast to right center in his first Yankee at bat, and the Yankees take a 2-0 lead.
3-2, and that's out to deep left field. This one's got a chance to go, and it does. Big fly for Mike Trout. There's his first knock of 2018, and it gives the Angels a 1-0 lead. Bryce Harper, high in the air, deep center. See you later. A monster shot the other way.
Cover 2 podcast back on OC Rock Radio for our final segment of the show. And we're talking a little MLB, as Nick had mentioned before we went to break, giving our predictions on the season, who we think will win each division, our MVPs, and even who will win the World Series. So we are a week into the season already. Most teams have played probably about 5 or 6 games. So I'm going to hand it over to Nick and get his initial thoughts on the beginning of the season and who he likes so far.
Yeah, and it's been interesting start to the regular season so far. We've obviously had a lot of storylines. Stanton with New York, we talked a little bit about that in Do You Care? Shohei Ohtani, we talked about that a little bit in Do You Care as well. And the Dodgers had an interesting series with the Giants. It's been a good start so far. Most of the teams that are expected to do well aren't like 0-6 or anything like that, and a lot of the teams that people didn't expect well are like 0-6. So it's pretty see-through so far. A couple of little things here and there, but I think if you picked teams at the beginning of the season to do well, right now your predictions aren't too much off. But I mean, those people, the people that did pick the Reds to be one of the worst teams they are, pick Miami to be one of the worst teams they are, and pick San Diego, they are too. So it's not nothing too crazy, but still interesting. And anything you see off the bat, just in this first week of baseball?
Just watching the, more or less the hometown teams, and obviously the Angels with Shohei Ohtani. I think the Angels, starting off 4-2, played pretty well. They obviously their first home game lost 0-6, and it was kind of like, oh boy. And then they came out last night with a flurry of home runs and ended up beating the Indians. I think it was 13-2. So this team definitely has offensive firepower and offensive weapons, and I think I'm going to beat this one into the ground. It's really going to come down to their pitching, and Matt Shoemaker's already on the DL for 10 days, so they're already having to call up another pitcher. But if this pitching staff can just be consistent and keep this team in games, then I really think that they have a chance to go far. I think that they've added a lot of good pieces, and on paper, this should be one of the best teams in at least the American League. Obviously, in their own division, they've got the Houston Astros, who should be the favorites to win not only that division, but the AL, in my opinion. You got the Red Sox, who are looking really good. The Yankees, obviously, on paper with Stanton and Judge. So it's going to be a huge competition. But I think the Angels right now, at least the first week of the season, look like they, could be a legitimate team going forward.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because there was a lot of questions surrounding the team just because of how Ohtani would do and how Garrett Richards would come back as their number one and stuff like that. And obviously they've added a lot of hitting depth with Zach Cozart and Ian Kinsler and people like that, and re-signed Justin Upton. But this Angel team looks exactly like it is. It looks like a team that has a great lineup and a team that has solid pitching, potentially with two aces, and that is a threat for the AL. Like you mentioned, they have the Houston Astros, who have looked probably like the best team again to start the season. They still have those star hitters in the middle of their lineup that I unfortunately watched beat the Dodgers in the World Series, and they added pitching. And their fifth starter is a guy that was one of the best pitchers in the World Series. So they're stacked. But yeah, I mean, looking at it, I think maybe the biggest story so far is that the Angels are succeeding at what they're in. And the only bad game of the season has been that game against Cleveland on opening night in Anaheim. But the rest of those games were super entertaining, and even the one they lost, there was a lot of hitting involved and not too many pitching gaffes. It was more one or two big mistakes. So yeah, I agree with you. The Angels might be the biggest story so far. So do we want to jump in predictions right now? Kind of start predicting who's going to win divisions, all that stuff. So you want me to lead off?
Take it away.
Okay, I'll go. So we'll start with the AL. We just started talking about them. I think, and we'll just go through this we won't go through the whole divisions and stuff like that, but we'll just kind of say who we think is going to win. I got in the AL West, Houston winning. I think they've started out amazing, and they look to be one of the best teams in the MLB again. In the Central, I have Cleveland. Now, one thing I'll say, the Minnesota Twins have surprised me already this season. They're one of those teams that I did not pick, when I was talking with my family and just talking to my other friends about stuff, about the beginning of the season. The Twins were not on my radar. They look like they're legit. They added some pitching, and they look like a pretty good team. So watch out for them, but I still got Cleveland. They're still a better team. And just from what I've seen to begin the season, I'm actually going to go with the Red Sox to win the AL East. The Yankees look good, but there's still those gaps. Stanton still strikes out 5 times a game. Judge, I don't believe has hit home run this season already, and he hasn't looked good. And the bullpen, 2 major gaffes from David Robertson and Dellin Betances against Toronto. I mean, the Yankees really should be undefeated to start this season, and they're not. It reminds me a little bit of the Dodgers. But So they have those little mistakes that they might have to get used to, and I think Boston will win enough games in the beginning of the season to end up winning the division. And then my 2 wild card teams, the Yankees, I'm putting in. There's no way they're not making it. And like we mentioned, the Angels look like one of the best teams, so I got the Angels. So although I said good things about the Twins, unfortunately, there's not enough spots for them in the playoffs this year.
Right. No, the Twins were going to be my team that I think last year they kind of snuck up on a lot of people. So this season, I think they're on a lot more people's radars. And you're right. They're 2-2 so far, but I think they're playing a lot better than maybe their early record shows. To start off in the West, I agree with you. How can you go against the Houston Astros? The way that they've come out and they started 5-1 this season, obviously winning the World Series last year, and they've done nothing but really reload their roster, bringing back basically everyone from that team, if not more. So Houston, I have winning in the West. In the Central, I do think it is going to be the Indians, even though so far I think their pitching has looked pretty awful, especially this game last night against the Angels, where I think they gave up 5 home runs. So
7 runs in 2 innings.
Yeah, it's still obviously really early. I think it's going to be the Indians and the Twins who are going to battle for that top spot, but I think the Indians will come out on top in the Central. In the East, I'm still going to give it to the Yankees.
Gotcha.
I think, listen, yes,
not that pick.
Stanton, he does strike out a lot, and so does Judge. But guess what? They're going to get in their grooves. They're both going to hit close to 50 home runs. If they don't both hit 50 home runs, they're going to get over 100 RBIs. I think this team has too much firepower on offense. I think their bullpen will come together. It's still early in the season, so I don't want to. You're right. This team really should be undefeated if they wouldn't have had those bullpen miscues. But I think it's too early to sit here and push the panic button or anything like that. So I'm going to give the East to the Yankees, but I think the Red Sox will be right behind them as one of those wild card spots. And then I also agree with you. I think the Angels have enough firepower to get in as the wild card. If it weren't for the Houston Astros, I would give the West to the Angels.
I would too, yeah.
But you have to give it to them. So I picked the Angels and the Red Sox as my 2 wild card winners coming out of the AL.
Yeah, so we have the same teams making the playoffs.
Basically,
for the AL.
yeah, we do.
It's hard to pick. I mean, there's a couple teams. We mentioned the Twins. I also think Seattle is underrated this year. They added a lot of hitting depth. D. Gordon's playing center field. So they
Nelson Cruz just went on the DL.
He went on the DL, yeah. He was still hitting home runs though, even though his ankle hurt. So it's crazy, but but not much in the AL besides those 2 other teams. I mean, I guess Baltimore maybe, but they still have absolutely no starting pitching. I mean, I know they added Alex Cobb right before the season started, but he's not starting his year until mid-April, maybe even late April. So I don't think Baltimore's there. Obviously, Tampa's not good. Neither is Toronto. So there's I think if you had to look at 2 teams that maybe make it besides those 5 teams, it's Seattle and Minnesota. But as far as ours goes, I think there's a reason we picked the same teams.
Exactly.
So let's move on to the NL. Jay, I'll let you start this one. Why don't you pick your NL?
Yeah, so in the NL, in the West, this is probably one of the better divisions in my opinion. I'm still going to pick the Dodgers, even though they're coming out and they're 2-4, so they're not playing probably as good as most would think. To begin the season, the Arizona Diamondbacks look really, really good so far. But I'm going to pick the Dodgers, and I think it's because of their pitching. And when you listen, they still have Kershaw, right? And they've still got good hitting. So I think in the end, the Dodgers will come out of this division. But I think I want to pick 2 other teams in this division as well. But I'm gonna hold off for a minute and just stick with the Dodgers for right now. In the Central, this is probably the toughest division for me to pick a winner. I want to pick the Cardinals, but I think I really it's tough for me to go against the Cubs. I think from them winning a couple years ago with still having Joe Madden, they did lose some pitching to free agency in the offseason, but I think the Cubs with Chris Bryant and Rizzo and all those other guys, I think they have a lot of firepower, and I think they will, get it together. They're right now sitting at 2-3, but like I said, it's still way too early to say that they can't come back or that they can't get things going. So in the Central, I'm going to pick the Cubs slightly over the Cardinals. In the East, for me, this is probably one of the easier divisions to pick, and I think it's the Nationals. Clear, and there's no real doubt about that. Bryce Harper, it was funny. I forget if it was yesterday or the day before when he got heckled by that one fan, and then he hit it like a 400-foot bomb, basically, and or he had 2 home runs in that game. But right after he was being heckled by a fan, he came out and hit a home run. So Bryce Harper is really all I need to say with the Nationals. Obviously, they have Strasburg and a lot of other players, but because of the division, I think you have to just hand it to the Nationals.
Yeah, no, it's funny you mentioned Harper. He's 3 straight days with home runs. He's 4 home runs to start the season. My dad and I were talking about this, and we'll take a little break from the predictions real quick. Is there any chance you think he hits 50 home runs this year? And how he looked so locked in to begin the season. I think he is going to absolutely guarantee himself that $40 million contract.
$400 million.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Well, here's the thing. I don't know if the team will sign in 10 years. That's the thing. I see more, especially the way free agency went in the offseason. I don't see teams just giving all that to a player. Now, Bryce Harper's a generational player. He's only like 26 or whatever. So he's, you'd have him until he's 36 and you'd have him for a lot of years. But I think the smarter way is actually the way the Dodgers did it with Kershaw. 7 years, 5-year opt-out, whatever. You give the guy, if you suck or he doesn't, he wants to go get more money, he can opt out or whatever. But I see more of a 7-8 year deal than a 10-year deal. But it still would be $40 million a year. So yes, if it was 10 years, it'd be $400. I think with the way Altuve was paid, though, Altuve's a great player. He's a little older. I think you can bump it up $10 million for Bryce Harper.
Right, yeah, no, Altuve is not Bryce Harper. I think Bryce Harper is one of the rising stars along with Mike Trout. Those guys are on a whole different pedestal, and I think those guys, I'm not saying they deserve $400 million, but if anyone were to get $400 million, I would not be surprised if it was Harper.
Well, in the way the NBA's paying players now, too, it's almost like $40 million a year isn't really that big of a deal.
Right,
I mean, guys in baseball and football, especially football, should be getting paid that much, and that's what's going to happen. I mean, I think Trout's getting paid $34-35 million a year this year. His contract has now made it to where he's the highest paid player in baseball. So if Mike Trout's getting that much, Bryce Harper should at least get that much, and just the way the market is, he probably should get a little bit more. So, but 50 home runs, watch out for it. This might be one of my predictions of the year is that Bryce Harper hits 50 home runs. He started, so it's a little cheap prediction, but he started with 4 in 3 games. So good for him. But yeah, I'll start. Well, who are your wild card teams, real quick?
So my wild card, I'm going to go the Arizona Diamondbacks and the St. Louis Cardinals.
Gotcha.
Those are my 2 wild card teams.
So I'll go with mine. Same division winners: Dodgers, Nats, and Cubs. Way too hard to pick any of the teams besides them. Dodgers have started off crappy. Not pitching, but hitting. I think all that does is that they're going to have a span of like 50 games this year again where their hitting is all going to be on par. So not to be worried, Dodger fans. They'll still win this division because the other teams, D-backs and Rockies and Giants, D-backs have started well, but the Rockies and Giants haven't started as good as they could have. So I do think the Dodgers won the winning division. Nationals, like you mentioned, not much competition besides the Mets in their division. I mean, the Phillies look like a complete disaster. Something my friend Ryan would say on my other podcast, but Gabe Kapler had used 23 pitchers in first 3 games of the season. So
wow.
Yeah, Gabe Kapler, and also you'll love this story. You might have seen this already. He took a pitcher out in the 2nd inning, Vince Velasquez, and didn't have a guy warming up. Just took out his pitcher. So, and they ended up losing that game, I think 17-3 or something like that.
It's a great strategy.
Yeah, great. Gabe Kapler, real good start in Philadelphia so far. But a team that a lot of people said might make the playoffs, yeah, that's not happening.
I don't think so.
And it makes it more that the Nationals are going to win the division. Cubs, this is the toughest. I actually think this is the toughest division in baseball this year. Because the Cardinals, like you mentioned, they're always good. Milwaukee Brewers, though, just like the Twins, they added some stuff. They added some hitting. They look like a very, very good team, but the Cubs are still winning the division. The Pirates also don't look completely terrible this year, and I'm forgetting the last team in the division. The Reds, they suck. So it's not. It's not. There's a reason I forgot about them. But so it'll be a little tough for the Cubs, but I still think they'll win it. But not by that much. I think that will probably be the closest division race between the 3 leagues. And my wild card, I got the D-backs winning as well. I just changed it. I originally had the Mets getting in, but I remembered, the Diamondbacks really didn't lose that much. They lost J.D. Martinez, but other than that, they still have this similar pitching. And Zach Greinke, although he had a terrible offseason and terrible preseason spring training, his start was fantastic in his opening debut. A lot like Ohtani for the Angels. So nothing to be worried about there. D-backs will make the playoffs. And I'm going to go with the Brewers. I think the Brewers will make it in over the Cardinals. I think they have better hitting, and I think their pitchers are underrated there in Milwaukee. And Ryan Braun seems to be back in a way to his MVP status. So I'm going Brewers, D-backs, and then the same division winners, Dodgers, Nationals, and Cubs. So before we predict the World Series and who we predict is going to succeed in the playoffs, let's start doing the awards. So we'll start with MVP, like a lot of people do. I'll start with my MVP for the. We'll start with AL since we started with AL for the other division. I have to think about this a little bit, but I think it's going to end up being Giancarlo Stanton again. I think he's going to do enough with his stats to be the MVP. That short porch in right field, it will get him to 40, 50 home runs. Like we mentioned in Do You Care, he struck out 5 times. Who cares? It was raining. Not a big deal, but I think Stanton will be a back-to-back winner as far as MVPs, one in the NL and one in the AL. So I'm going with him for the AL and the NL. I'm gonna go with Bryce Harper, but a surprise is Yasiel Puig.
Really?
Yeah, and
wow.
A-Rod actually on the Sunday Night Baseball broadcast the other day really it made me make this prediction because he explained how with Puig's defense and the way he's been hitting, he went, I think, 1 for 5 in the Dodgers game last night, and they lost 6-2, and they didn't look good. Every ball he hit, though, was over 100 miles an hour. And he's been doing that. He's been clearly the Dodgers' best hitter to start the season. He's a guy that could hit 30 home runs, potentially have 100 RBIs. He has the best arm in baseball, and he's a Gold Glove winner. That sounds like an MVP to me. But I do think that Bryce Harper, like we're saying, could hit 50 home runs. So I'm going to give him the MVP. But watch out for Yasiel Puig to be in the MVP, that MVP conversation. You're looking for the word at the end of the season. Jared, who are you?
Wow, that one's pretty shocking to me. And I'm glad you have some type of different opinion because mine are going to be very basic and straightforward. For me, I think it's Mike Trout. I think with how the Angels have struck this lineup and they bring Justin Upton in. Obviously, Pujols is not what he used to be, but I think he can still be somewhat of a consistent power hitter for them. You bring in Ian Kinsler. You've got Cole Calhoun, who's definitely more of a single and doubles type of guy. But I think this team has a lot more firepower than it has in the last couple of years. And I think what that's going to do is that's going to free up Mike Trout to be able to see more pitches. I don't think pitchers are going to be able to pitch around Trout anymore. So I think that's only going to play to his benefit. I think Trout's the type of guy that could... Listen, if he stays healthy, I know last year he broke his thumb sliding into second base and he missed some games. If he can stay completely healthy, I think Trout's a guy that can get up to 40 home runs. Now, he's not... I don't know if he's going to get into that 50 home run conversation, but he doesn't need to be, in my opinion, for him to be an MVP candidate. I think if he gets to 40, and the major thing, if the Angels are competitive. Micah Trout is, we obviously know, one of the best players in baseball, but because the Angels haven't really been competitive in the last couple of years, I don't think you see really any of those players other than Trout being considered for awards. So if they can be competitive and be a little more in the spotlight, I think that's only going to play into Trout's hands. So for the AL, I think it's Trout. And then in the NL, I have to agree with you. I think it's Bryce Harper.
Yeah.
The way that he started off this season, he looks like he's on a tear. I agree with you. I think he's going to get to 50 home runs. I don't think that's really a question as long as he can stay healthy as well. So I think the two rising stars and really the two faces of Major League Baseball right now, and both of their respective leagues, the AL and the NL, Bryce Harper and Mike Trout, take home the MVPs.
Just knock down the mic real quick.
Dropping the mic.
Hold on.
Literally dropping
I'll
the
have
mic.
to hold it up for the rest of the podcast.
Yes, you will.
We only have 2 minutes left. We actually have had some good conversations so far. So, real quick, who are your Cy Youngs? There's not much analysis. We don't have a lot of time. But
No. I'm going to go with Kershaw and Chris Sale.
Yeah, I'm going to have to pick Chris Sale in the AL as well. But the NL, I'm going to go actually repeat champion. I'm going to go Max Scherzer wins it again for the Nationals. I think the Nationals might have the best record in baseball this year. So they're a really good team. So I'll go with them. And then our World Series picks.
Oh boy.
I'll start with this one. I have to do it, Jared. I have to go with my Dodgers. I think what happened last year, there's no way they don't get back. Although this is the same thing I said about Gonzaga, and they didn't do well. But I do think the Dodgers get back. I will say this, though. I think Houston actually is going to make it back to the World Series. They look really good.
You think it's a rematch?
I think it's going to be a rematch. I think the Dodgers take it this time. And I don't know whatever games it's going to take, but I think they do take it. Jared, who's your World Series?
Yeah, no, I'm going with Houston as well. I think they are poised to, have somewhat of a dynasty for the next 4 to 5 years and be contenders. So right now, I think it's tough to go against them in the AL, and I think it's going to be against the Washington Nationals. I think Scherzer and Strasburg, and obviously Bryce Harper leading the way with their hitting. I think it would be really cool to see Harper go up against the Astros and all of their pitching and everything. So I'm going to go with Houston Astros versus the Nationals in the World Series.
I would be satisfied with either. There you go, you hear the music right there. It's Enter Sandman. That means we are done. Hey, great to be back, Jared. Glad you were safe and had fun in Africa. We'll be back next week. No more breaks or anything like that. And I believe in 2 weeks we're going to have an NFL draft preview podcast. So
cannot wait.
Yeah, we cannot wait. This is the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio.